Welcome everyone, and thank you for your time today to join us on this webinar sponsored by For All Portal. My name is Senharib and I'm the Partner Account Manager. Together with our Sales and Marketing Director, Dominic from For All Portal, I would like to introduce you to our panelist, Matthew from our preferred partner, Cyangate. Matt has years of experience in the world of DAM, and he will share some of his thoughts and insights of today's topic. The webinar today is titled Bringing Clarity to Your Retail Content with Digital Asset Management. Just a note for you, if you have any questions, please use the panel we've opened for you. Feel free to use it and we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Also, we are recording the webinar and you will all be sent a link of the recording tomorrow. So this is the agenda for today's webinar. First, I would like to say a couple of words about the For All Portal. Matt will then guide you through his slides and will share how retailers can utilize DAM in the right way. Okay, as some of you know, we are a German-based company. We've been around since 2001 with a growth of 30% year-over-year. We do this with a highly skilled partner ecosystem in around 15 countries. Our team today is about 50 people in size. We have 100+ customers with a total number of 500+ users. We won 2 innovation awards in the last 12 months at the Henry Stewart conference in New York and in San Diego. This proves that we have a very innovative and reliable DAM and PIM software, right? So in the next slide, we will see a very quick overview of some of our customers. Several are in the retail space as well. Our growing partner ecosystem consists of experienced implementation partners like Cyangate or Wisestime, integration partners like Templify, and technology partners like Chili, Magento, Adobe, and so on. They're all located all over the world. Now, before I hand over to my colleague Matt from Cyangate, we would like to ask for your feedback on the following question. We would like to know how many of the attendees have A, a DAM, B, a PIM, C, both in place, or D, are considering to implement either a DAM, a PIM, or both in the near future. So feel free to tell us your answer. We will give you a couple of seconds. So we have the feedback, I think. So the feedback looks like 57% of the attendees have DAM already in place. About 5% are using a PIM, and wow, 30% already using both. And the rest are in the middle of the evaluation. That's good. Now, that's the result of the poll. Now I would like to turn over to Matt. Matt, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Senharib. Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Patulski, and as Senharib mentioned, I'm with Cyangate, where we are a implementation partner with For All Portal, and we work in the digital asset management space. And a lot of what I'm going to be speaking to you about today with regards to clarifying DAM in retail is drawn on my experiences at Cyangate with a number of our clients, and also pulling in my years of experience working as a consultant and as an analyst with different CPG manufacturers, retailers, and private label product producers. So the symmetry of retail. in clarifying digital asset management in retail, we really need to talk about digital asset management in the retail space as being two sides of the same coin, where you have producers and who provide content and provide product for the marketplace, and the retailers who provide the marketplace for the producers to deliver their products to consumers like you and I. Each organization has its own ecosystem for creating and managing their digital content, but at the same time, they're also part of a larger system of content and product delivery. So in thinking about this broader landscape, I'm now going to move through a few slides where I'm going to break things down between what a producer's ecosystem looks like with digital asset management, and then what a retailer's environment looks like with digital asset management. So starting with a producer and looking at this process that they move through on the screen, left to right over time, and upstream to downstream from the top of the slide to the bottom of the slide. Producers, the dam sits somewhere right in the middle of their ecosystem. There are upstream from the dam, you've got the PIM, enterprise resource planning, and customer relationship management going on. Downstream from the dam, you're actually delivering your digital assets, your digital media, and you're pushing that out into channels, print, digital, and GDSN. In that process of preparing content to go out into the market, you are aggregating truth. In your CRM, you are having a conversation about who's asking for the product. In your ERP, you're trying to decide what resources do you need to produce the product. The PIM is that first point of aggregation where you're pulling together all of this information about what defines the product. You're managing all of this through a wrapper of master data management to make sure that your data is consistent, your data is timely, it's relevant, and it's accurate to your retailers that you're delivering both your product and your digital content to in the marketplace. As you deliver product, of course, it goes without saying that the first thing in delivering product is the product itself. But in support of that product, and this is where digital asset management comes into play, you have consumer content such as product descriptions, specifications, and romance copy. What is it like to live with that product? What is it like to use that product? How do you make that product part of somebody's life? You also have what could be broadly called regulatory content, guidelines for safe use and for risk mitigation. That could be an over-the-counter product. It could be something from the DIY space, such as a paint product or home improvement. And then, of course, there's at the bottom of the list, but not necessarily the bottom of priorities, is the media. Standard compliant and editorial imagery. Standard compliant meaning that it's compatible with larger retail digital asset ecosystems, as well as editorial, the other side of the romance copy that tells the story of living with that particular product that the producer is going to market with the retailer. All of this gets aggregated through the processes in the product producer, the processes that they go through, into a set of basically three kinds of deliverables that to prepare them for the retail space. You have print digital assets, physical ready materials for going to market. You've got digital counterparts, materials that can be repurposed for web and social resources to inform customer choices. And then you have GDSN, raw product data ready to be consumed by partners. GDSN, that's an acronym that we all hear a lot about if you're in the retail space. Let's unpack that a little bit. GDSN is a global data synchronization network. It's come about, GDSN has come about as supply chains have moved their business processes over to the digital realm. out of this content migration, a series of global standards for media, for content, and the ability to synchronize this through standards compliant networks has resulted in systems to support retailers and producers in collaborative commerce. Producers are now able to manage a leaner supply chain, and they're also able to more manage brand variations through content and delivery standards provided by GDSN. So as we look at this, if you remember a couple slides back, we had the square, the delivery square. We had product data and product media. That gets put into the GDSN network and then gets distributed out to retailers on the other side of that network. Retailers that are then taking that digital content and conditioning it to their specific needs and their specific systems. So let's now talk about the retailer side of this coin that we've been looking at. This is a diagram that looks very similar to what we saw a few slides ago, but it's in the sense that, yes, we have an ERP, we have a CRM, PIM, DAM, master data management, and channels, but it's organized in a slightly different way. This system, the retailer's digital content ecosystem, is engaged through the delivery of digital content from the producer. So we have consumer content, regulatory content, and product media that we spoke about previously, all of which is going into the DAM. But then it's also, some of that is going into the PIM. And there's this connection, this symbiosis between the PIM and the DAM. Product logistics are fed into the retailer's planning systems, resource planning, and into their CRM. So that, again, you have this whole ecosystem that's working in response to taking a product to market, of which DAM is a very large part, a very important part, the visual part of that experience. And it has connections into these other enterprise systems where an image has a piece of information associated with it around a product description. An image has an association to it around a materials data sheet, or to an expiration date of that specific item as to when it's appropriate to have it in market and to remove it from the market, end of life of that product. That then gets pushed out through retail channels on the right side of the screen, where again, you've got consumer content, regulatory content, product media, a mirror of what we're seeing on the left, but this is all materials that have been conditioned for the specific needs of that retailer. The retailer may receive content from a producer, but they may choose not to use all of it. They'll selectively edit it based on guidelines and relationships they have with the producer. They may choose to tailor that romance copy to something that's specific for their client base that might be different than another retailer. So in the reality of things, you may see the same product displayed in slightly different ways if you're going to Target or Walmart or Amazon. They all have that same item, but they all tell that story in a slightly different way based on what they understand success to be in the market. The downstream channels, what is that? How does a retailer go to market? They're still print and they're still digital. So they've taken everything that they've received from those first three channels. They're not going back out onto GDSN most of the time. And instead they have these materials for taking that product to market in the print space, taking that product to market in the digital space. So I've been talking about a lot of things that aren't necessarily the DAM, a lot of things that are touching the DAM, a lot of things that are maybe passing through the DAM. So really kind of the question is, the DAM is sitting in this much larger landscape now, but what is still in your DAM? Well, it's the same as it ever was. Your DAM is still that repository for metadata, for media, for process, for rights management. And now what I'm going to do is go through a few real-world examples of taken from the consumer retail space to kind of activate some of these concepts that I've been talking about here for the last 15 minutes or so. Of course, in your DAM, you've got product media. Across these categories for consumer packaged goods, general merchandise, the DIY space, the apparel space, all of this kind of content still sits in a DAM, even though it has come, it may have been created in your DAM as a manufacturer and pushed out into GDSN, or you may be a retailer who's received that content from GDSN networks and other manual and automated processes, and now it resides in your DAM. In the DAM, you still have product media. Honey Nut Cheerios, the #1 cereal product in North America, a third of the market, and a really great example of a product that is seen, that comes from one producer, but then is also seen across a number of different retailers in a number of different ways. But it all starts with just a few basic metadata fields that reside in your DAM, and then dozens of other metadata fields that may be in other systems that have a relationship to the DAM. So as content creators, if you're working in the retail space and you're a content creator, you start by going to your DAM and you want to find the name of the product. You may have the GTIN number for the product, the identifier for that specific version of that specific item. You have a description, you may have tags, you may have an expiration date. And that's enough for you to find this asset in your system and then start discussing how to take that to market. With this base, let's see, next slide. So starting first with taxonomy. In the previous slide, we had tags for how General Mills is defining Honey Nut Cheerios, and as a producer, that's the language they're using. But then let's look at how these major retailers are using that same terminology to build taxonomies that are describing how they're taking it to market, how they're positioning it within their retail ecosystem. Where in looking at, say, Amazon or Target or Kroger, they're all talking about it. At some point, they reference it as a breakfast food. That's a very high point on the within the taxonomy. They're all talking about it as cereals, but they're all talking about it as cereal and granola, or breakfast and cereal, or just breakfast. What's interesting at the bottom here, when you look at Meijer, they're talking about it as a specialty diet item, which is very interesting, that it's gluten-free, that it is a gluten-free breakfast item. And they're specifically positioning it for a demographic that they've identified as being appropriate for them in terms of reaching a consumer that these other organizations may be reaching implicitly, and Meijer is making this choice through the taxonomy that they developed as a retailer to reach out to them explicitly. Sure, you can find that content in a different way if you went to their website, but this is how they're formally doing it. And each organization takes that information that a manufacturer may provide, and they build their systems around what works for them. And this is a great example. Another piece of information that may also be tracked in your DAM, as we're talking about product imagery, is also product ephemera. Ephemera is a broad term, but basically in this instance, with this DIY product, Rust-Oleum paint, we have a technical data sheet and a safety data sheet. Within your DAM, as a retailer, as a producer for the retail space, and as a retailer taking items to market, it's not enough simply to put that information out there that we're selling this product. This is a product that requires risk mitigation. These documents that could have a relationship with the main product and the main product's metadata within your DAM and within your go-to-market channels is very important. So you're not, as you're thinking about retail, you're not just thinking about, hey, I need to sell this item. I need to also make sure that my customers are using it safely, that we're following certain compliance guidelines, whether they're regulatory or legal or just a general customer experience expected from the producer. Now, I want to talk about GS1 Media and its relationship to I mentioned previously, GDSN. GS1 is an organization that is responsible for the GDSN network. GS1, if you're going to market with retail, the first thing that you see as either a content producer and your expectation as a retail content consumer, meaning I'm the materials I'm receiving from my manufacturer, my Cheerios box here, my expectation is I'm going to receive a packet of media that is GS1 compliant. What GS1 image standards do is they enable the consumer to make apples to apples comparison of similar products through a consistent presentation of packaging, product materials, nutritional and instructional information, both in print and online. You'll see these images that could be in that weekly ad that comes with your Sunday paper. They could be in the website when you go to place your shipped order today. And it starts from the same source. These images drive a consistent presentation through the angles of shots. Each of these images, you'll see a code here, A1C1, A1R1, A2C1. That code describes specifically what that image is that the producer is making to meet the requirements of the retailer, so that they can go to market with their product efficiently and without delay. And also, if they are replacing an existing digital asset with a revision, it makes it very easy for them to swap that out, because they know I want to do an exchange with I want to exchange out the old A1C1 with the new one, the old A2C1 with the new one. These image standards, they also drive a higher level of quality and consistency in product media for retailers, and they drive business process efficiencies, as I've just described. Now, here's another, sticking with the Cheerios, and think about this the next time you're in your favorite retailer. We have 3 different A1L1 images of the same product from General Mills, but they're all different. You could be looking at products that involve promotional campaigns, specific retailer requirements, and each of these may require unique packaging for common products. The GS1 standard images from the producer enable the retailer to swap out this media efficiently as needed for specific go-to-market requirements. The other opportunity here too is that with specialized product promotions, in the middle one you see a promotion for a film that's being released, Trolls, or on the left one you see a promotion for a website, begoodrewards.com. These items have a lifespan to them, and it's the responsibility of both the retailer and the producer to make sure that there is current, when this expires, that this is removed from the systems, the downstream systems that contain them, and it's updated with the most recent, the appropriate or approved content that is representing the current version of family size Honey Nut Cheerios. So what am I saying from a digital asset management administrator standpoint? Part of your role, if you think back to that short list of metadata fields, expiration dates, knowing that when a piece of content has reached the end of its life and why it's reaching the end of its life, the opportunity for using digital asset management to make the supply chain aware of this upstream and downstream through notifications, through expiration dates, and with that access control. This asset expires after the 31st of this year. Only admins have access to that content. That keeps the retailer from putting out content that may no longer be compliant with the relationship that they have with General Mills. So then also another part of this in going to market is how your digital assets inform both your physical and digital experiences in going out and obtaining that product, again, through that taxonomy. If we map that taxonomy on the digital side, on the right-hand side of the screen, which we saw previously, we know also as we walk physically through the store, this is the store near my house, we know that that product is, we enter through the growth, on the right-hand side, we have something that's very targeted to a specific audience of gluten-free consumers. They made that decision. But on the left-hand side, through that physical space, things are a bit more general. You enter through fresh, the grocery. You go to a specific aisle that has other kinds of products that have a relationship with each other. You have coffee at breakfast, you have cocoa at breakfast, you have snacks. But then you're made aware of where that sits in the aisle through additional signage. You find it on a shelf, and at the end of the day, you're finding your Honey Nut Cheerios. Where does that information come from? That decision making come from? That comes from decisions made about analyzing taxonomies that may be specific to the store level or to the region level that are held back in those systems we talked about previously, in your PIM and by extension in your DAM. Knowing that the DAM has to be aligned with these other systems that sit upstream, that are aggregating truth, that are pulling the different pieces of the puzzle together, that describe a product into a single place from multiple sources that need to be current and accurate, then informs all the way downstream when you reach out to that shelf to grab that box of cereal to put it in your cart, or you click that button on your website so that Shipt can bring it to your home. It also carries out into how you go to market with promotional materials. In this typical flyer here, we see in bottom left, we've got a lot of cereal on this flyer, but then we also have editorial photography that may go with that imagery. In this ad that this bottom right corner that I've pulled out of this particular ad, and this is typical of what you could find from any retailer in the country, is that not only do you have our ubiquitous family size Honey Nut Cheerios, but then you also have other products in the General Mills family of products. All of them that if you go back and look at this PDF, you have references to SKU numbers, GTIN numbers, media types, all of that information that you've been capturing and aggregating in that DAM that then you repurpose for how the retailer goes to market, is all rolled up in this 3x3 inch square that shows up in your Sunday paper. This also then provides an opportunity for you to understand, because this is part of your creative workflow. This flyer goes back into your digital asset management system through reporting, through analysis. You can understand, well, where are we selling, or where are we presenting for sale General Mills products, and how are they doing from a retail standpoint? And does it make sense to reuse this piece of art that shows vertical or plan views of cereal bowls in our next campaign? You can make all of those decisions because you've taken all of that content, you've aggregated that truth into your PIM and DAM, you have it associated with that media in your DAM as material to build new content from, such as this flyer. That flyer then ends up back in your DAM if you're a mature organization. And with that, you're doing an analysis of how successful that was for the next time for that specific region and product. So we then begin to see, we close the loop. This is where we started, with this idea that the producer and the retailer have this relationship between each other. One cannot exist without the other. And with this idea that this virtuous circle is constantly churning, the retailer is constantly asking the producer for content and product associated with that content. I'm speaking now because as a DAM person, I'm thinking about content, but the retailer is always thinking about product. And so we're working in service to the delivery of that product through our processes in digital asset management, through our processes associated with ERP and CRM upstream and PIM, as well as the processes downstream through the various media channels that this content gets pushed out in. So as we close the loop, we are able to constantly be reinventing how it is that we go to market for our product partners. So with that, we want to open this up for questions, and I'm going to turn that over to Senharib. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That was a very good presentation with lots of useful information, not only for retailers. As Matt already said, we are now open for the Q&A session. Please feel free to raise your questions using the question box at the very right-hand side.
Okay, so while we are waiting for questions, Matt, Dominic here. Thanks for your insights. I think was a very interesting presentation. And while we're waiting for questions, I can probably start a small discussion around these topics, because I would like to know from your inside view, what do you think if a producer or a retailer is working with a DAM and a PIM, how can he ensure that he don't have to maintain the metadata twice, because you have product metadata that you need for your assets as well, and you push these assets to your PIM, and I think no one is willing to work on the metadata twice. So how can you ensure that?
That's a great question, and that is an eternal question. Nobody likes to enter metadata, period. That is a challenge with DAM. And then with all of these new business, with the emerging complexity of business processes, there's all this other metadata that contextualizes that product that may exist as a digital asset in the DAM, but may only need to be acknowledged by the DAM. So it's through services, web services, APIs, in combination with business processes, how the organization actually, what are their strategies and rules and processes for managing that data. So Dominic, to your point, the content around a product may actually, would typically enter a business through the PIM. And the PIM, it might be the parent to hundreds of data points that the DAM may only need a small subset of to make that connection to the digital asset. So the asset is sitting, and both systems are doing what they do well. The PIM is controlling all that textual content that, and it's maintaining a relationship upstream with ERP and CRM, which also owns a piece of that puzzle. So maybe it's entered once in that customer relationship management system. Retailer X wants a custom version of the Cheerios box. That gets logged there. That then gets carried through the lifecycle process of creating that asset. But before that asset may be created, it may require, well, this is a new product. We need to define product information. So maybe then that piece of information that's been declared and is now a fixed value is now expanded upon in the PIM system through business processes there. And by the time it's fully refined in the PIM system, we then make a decision the organization makes a decision, well, we need to associate digital assets with that because we're ready to produce this for the client. So the people are entering metadata without actually realizing they're entering metadata because they're just going through their business processes in their area of the business. So by the time it hits the DAM, we know that we know a number of things about it, that it's a General Mills product, that it's Cheerios, that it's this size, that we're using the heart-shaped bowl, that all of this that's been defined through the asset lifecycle of landing on what should be created. The creative team produces that, it goes through its process, and it lands in the DAM. But all that upstream data does not need to be entered twice into the DAM. web services, APIs in a mature environment are bringing that information in anyway, keeping that information up to date, using the workflow capabilities of a mature DAM to create alerts if things have changed, or alerts in the PIM system if things have changed, or if they're using if they're platforming and they have a PIM DAM system, it's all residing in there, and there's even a tighter integration to those processes. So it's the thing to think about with digital asset management is it's just a tool. There are these other processes, and it's just a tool that sits in the toolbox. So you have these other systems in the toolbox and these processes or means of using those tools that all have to be taken into account before you can. And so if your processes are well defined, you're never doubling up on the manual effort of entering data, because if it's entered once, the process is mature, it should be available wherever it needs to be available because of that process design, that business process design. Definitely,
yes. And I have a question coming from the audience, which fits very well to this topic. It says, what is a good approach for deciding what meta to store in the DAM versus the PIM? Would it be more appropriate to store the asset URL in the PIM?
The asset, asset URL could mean a lot of things. The asset URL, let's say, I'm going to assume you're speaking about the asset URL, that relationship between the PIM and the DAM. The PIM knows where the asset is in the DAM. Sure. I'm going to assume it could be that, or you could also be talking about where does that asset sit out downstream through different channels like GDSN. And
no, I think it's the question about where the URL to the image in the DAM. So the relation from the PIM to the DAM system.
Yes. So absolutely, if you have a PIM system, think of PIM, it's information. Information is content. Think of these two different things as being, if it's information, it's probably textual. It's written language, it's letters and numbers, some of which may be only machine readable, and strings that are parsed that may tell you, may then be needed for a business process, or they could be human readable, such as product names, compliance, regulation, process points for having that content approved. I mentioned romance copy, that's a technical term, specific around that item, and how different organizations who might be producing content, if after this session you go out and look at the websites of the different retailers I mentioned, and each of them has a slightly different landing page for Cheerios, and each of them has slightly different messaging points and descriptions for Cheerios. You may find in the PIM that a relationship that the cereal manufacturer has with the large retailer requires them to have tailored content, a tailored box for that retailer A versus retailer B. That tailored content may sit in the PIM, that graphic, and with that, the URL to that tailored product packaging sits in the DAM. So the PIM is maintaining a relationship with the DAM through that URL to that asset. So if you needed to find that asset, the PIM would take you there automatically. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And we have another question from Tracy asking, can you explain how DAM worked with PIM in more detail? So probably that goes in this direction. If you're working with a DAM and a PIM, and you need to decide where to store the metadata in which system, and how do you get the relation between these two systems, could it be an approach to have a combined system where you work with DAM and PIM in one system? So again, can you explain how DAM works for PIM in more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think let me give you a redacted example from a real world experience where a product producer has is working with a retailer to produce a private label product. And that same product you may find across a number of retailers, but each retailer has its own branding, its own packaging, its own claims and descriptions. Retailer, there may be 200 data points to that product, and that all of that information is sitting in the PIM. Some of those data points that are specific to the digital asset, such as the name of it, the GTIN or UPC code, taxonomy specific information, some narrow subset of that information, a dozen fields, a couple dozen fields out of those potentially hundreds of fields. If you've aggregated all of that truth across your organization, you could have hundreds of fields of automated data, pieces of information that are rolled up into a PIM record. A subset of that, a few dozen records at most of it automatically generated because it's coming from upstream. The data, the river flows. Data is a river and it flows downstream, and it flows downstream from the PIM and then into the dam. So those smaller data points then are associated with that piece of media, which is a new unique data point. And that is what's sitting in the dam. So what does that do? That drives a single source of truth. If it's called Honey Nut Cheerios in the ERP and in the CRM, and then in the, wherever that point starts, that Honey Nut Cheerios carries all the way down through the system. That name is not changeable. And other data points with that. All that information is changeable. It's at each moment where a new and unique data point is introduced, a digital image of the front of the box, the side of the box, the top of the box. That's new content. That's a new relationship back upstream to those other assets. So that's what the DAM is doing best. It has a subset so that enough metadata so that asset is findable without being overwhelming. And then it has the assets that pictographically describe that textual information that you've been reading elsewhere. And then that information is shared back up, probably to the PIM. And possibly other systems. It really depends on the organization. So I think the PIM is always, it's always good to have the PIM sitting downstream from the DAM, because the PIM is always holding a lot more information, or it's sitting side by side. It's never above it, because the DAM is really your point of truth for media. It's not your point of truth for everything else about a product.
Exactly. And we saw, referring to the poll we had earlier, we saw that about 30% of the audience have both a PIM and a DAM in place. And to be honest, I assume some are using them as siloed solutions. So what would you think is the benefit for retailers to use both in a combined solution?
What I've seen, let me speak to what I've seen. I can only speak to that, and in every place I've been over the last, I've had the opportunity to work in a number of different, half a dozen different either consumer product good manufacturers or with retailers, retail partners over the last 4 years or so, and in every instance, they're making a decision at some point that we need some kind of we have a DAM, we've organized everything, but we need to take that content somewhere, and we have this other, we need to take that media, it needs to be pushed out into our ecosystem, it needs to be pushed out downstream, but we don't have the means to do that effectively, because our retail partners asking for all this other content that we just haven't organized. And that's the pain point for PIM. It's how do we work at scale with all this other information besides the media? And so often people, it's easier to respond. I imagine it's easier to respond to images. So we start organizing around that, but there's so much more that goes along with it. So if you don't have a PIM, you someday will probably need one, just because to manage all of, and it's not just about managing the content. The PIM is a tool for managing your business processes, because you can define who has access to that content. If you're in a heavily regulatory, an organization that's heavily regulated, like a DIY manufacturer like that makes paint, or an over-the-counter drug manufacturer that makes a number of products for in the private label space, you have huge regulatory requirements, and you would never put that in your DAM. But it'd be very difficult to manage that in your CRM, and it'd be very difficult to manage that in your enterprise resource planning system. That's where PIM comes in, because it's the place that pulls in all of this information from these other data sources and can be used to manage the business process, because PIM is about managing information, and it's about managing another kind of business processes. How do you move this product now that we know somebody wants it, now that we've defined what it is, now that we've defined what it looks like? How do we manage taking it to market and making sure that it's what the client wants, that it's safe, that it continues to be safe, and that we can verify that through some kind of accountability in our compliance rules in our organization. So PIM is key. And another place that you're seeing PIM grow, and this is where you may see PIM or see PIM platformed downstream from a DAM, is around syndication. The GDS1 standards, the GDSN standards that I mentioned in the presentation are driving a lot of organizations to request data in a very specific way, and they all request it differently. The top 10 retailers in North America all ask for their media and product content to be delivered in all slightly different ways and slightly different orders. The same field may be called description in one organization and product description in another, and something else in a third. And all of that needs to be managed in an efficient way, because we're talking about we're at scale. We're talking about tens of thousands of units a day, and we need that key information specifically about that product that you're trying to get that retailer to carry, delivered in a consistent way in the language that they're using, in the language of the realm, the terminology that they're defining that with. So PIM also facilitates that, and that lets you be ready regardless. Not only are you ready for your existing partners, it makes you ready for new opportunities, because you've again aggregated that truth. It's a term that I hear more and more, an aggregated source of truth, because truth in an organization doesn't exist in any one place at any one time. You can only bring it together, and in that particular moment in the PIM, is it true? That's a little metaphysical.
When you talk about data, truth of data, so getting back to Senharib's question, if you have a combined solution of DAM and PIM in one system, and you don't have siloed solution, you at least have one less system where you have to store data and where you can create a single source of truth. So if you combine these two systems, you have one system where you have at least your product and your product media related system in one single place.
Absolutely, Dominic. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it goes back to the URL question. Actually, the URL doesn't. It lives in the platform. If you can have if you, instead of having an ecosystem where the two are tied together but they're discrete applications, if we're talking about your platform where they're combined, it's not a question you have to worry about, and you just worry about that relationship. The relationship is defined in the platform because they're all sitting together. Then you focus on business processes, on access control, permissions, security, rights management. You've actually removed the opportunity there, and having a platform that's both a PIM and a DAM is that you can streamline your processes even more, because I'm a DAM user. I may never see all of that data in the PIM, but I don't have to worry about it, because if I put this in here and associate it with that record, it gets also associated for the PIM users who may never really see any of the processes I go through to create that digital asset.
So there is another good question coming from the audience, which says, what is your approach with syndication from DAM and PIM to omnichannels and stores?
Approach. well, from a, I guess I'd, some of that syndication is a real thing that we all have to, if we're a producer delivering content to a retailer, we have to take that into account. So practically speaking, there's two different ways you can do that. You can use your existing system. Most PIMs on the market are enabling some form of syndication, and you work with your retail partner that you're delivering that product to make sure that you're able, that you have that capability configured into your system. It's in essence opening a collaboration with that retail partner. I have a PIM, I want to sell something on Amazon. What does Amazon require from my PIM to automatically upload that into the system? That's what I was speaking about before, where Amazon may have the same 10 fields as Walmart, but they're in a different sequence and they have a different name. So I enter in as a retail partner, with them being my retail partner or myself being a product partner, I entered into a conversation with them to make sure that we're aligned and I'm able to deliver that to them. A lot of these organizations, if you go out and look at them, they have partner portals where they work with you on the data cleansing that you may need to do, the data formatting. Cleansing is the wrong word. I take that back. It's more about the normalizing data between the two organizations. If you're a preferred vendor of any large retailer, they'll have the resources available to you, and you enter into that that conversation as a partner and go through the business process and the technical process of defining that information in your system so that it can be syndicated to them. If your DAM platform or your PIM platform does not have syndication capabilities, there's a number of SaaS platforms out there that also allow you to do that through web services, and they offer different levels of services to do that same action on your behalf, and they may act as an intermediary between these large retailers and your organization, and instead you're working with them to make sure your data is normalized so that it can go to both Walmart and Amazon and Target and wherever. So
from my point of view, it's also a question about the channel itself, because if you talk about your most important channels that you would like to deliver your product data to, for example, your web shop or your catalog or whatever, you should have the data stored in your PIM, and you should have the channel related content so that you can store different data for your catalog and your web shop. If it's just about content syndication, like spreading it out wherever it can go, there are, as you said, systems that are doing that and spreading it to every online shop that is around the world. So that if you really want to spread it to multiple sites, you can use these tools. And if you say, these are my primary channels, you should have, from my point of view, the data in your channel-wise in your PIM.
Absolutely, yes. It does. It actually, the PIM is actually your gateway. It's the DAM is in service of the PIM, and which may make some people on the call uncomfortable, but really it's part of this law. And there's at times when the PIM is in service of the DAM, but as you go to market, it's often the PIM, to your point, Dominic, that's in service of the DAM is in service of the PIM, and the PIM is delivering that content to the retailer. GDSN is another means. If you're putting content out through a qualified GDSN network, then you're already available for syndication, and there's a number of retail partners that you may already have that are also using that. So the conversation you need to have is with who are you partnering with? Is the data that resides in your PIM and the data that resides in your DAM, is that normalized in a way that the partner can use that? And if not, have a conversation with them, but then also look and see, is my content normalized for GDSN? Because that will automatically make my product available to a much larger audience. But it does, to Dominic, you're absolutely right. It really, the PIM is often the key.
Okay, well, thank you guys, and thank you, Matt. We are basically at the end of our time. We were not able to answer all the questions, but we definitely will come back to your questions offline. And if you want any more information on anything on the DAM and the PIM, or if you would like to see how For All portal works, please reach out to any of us. You will see all our contact details over here. At the very end of this webinar, I would like to thank the panelist, Matt Patulski, for participating and for the great content you delivered to this webinar. I also would like to thank the attendees and the team from Henry Stewart's.